And good evening. My name is Keith Pongren. I am your presenter tonight for the 14 Absolute Truths of Security. Just a quick little background on me. I am, as you can see, a senior SANS instructor. I do have a ton of alphabet soup after my name. Been doing this stuff, the very brief resume. Been doing this stuff for over 35 years now, and by stuff I mean computers, networking, et cetera, in general, but cybersecurity in particular. In fact, I started long before cybersecurity was a term. We went through many iterations through the years, but I started my career January 1985 with the United States Air Force, working crypto keys and codes, but also working in their brand new computer security program. Spent 6 years in the service, got out, went to work for AT&T as a security consultant, built and ran Sprint's first international security consulting practice. Eventually put out my own shingle, started my own consulting company. It's what I still do to this day. But so 35 plus years working in what we now refer to as cybersecurity. Along the way, 24 books. Sorry, I had 14 on the brain because of the name of the talk. 24 books have been published, all of them training courses, of course, and a whole bunch of articles through the years. So you see my email address there. You have a standing for life invitation to send me questions via email, and if I can possibly help you out, I am more than happy to do so. Now, do keep one thing in mind. I've had that email address since 1997. And so I'm on every spammer's list in the world. If you could do me a favor, if you're going to send me an email, put the word student somewhere in the subject line. And if you do that for me, then that is A, going to keep you out of my spam folder, and B, it puts a flag in my email so I know that's a message I definitely want to take a look at. But, you know, if I just get a message from Joe or Sally or whatever, and the subject is hello, well, guess where that's going to wind up. And some folks had asked for my Twitter information, so you see that there too. Now, you can download this talk as well as my other night talks and a bunch of other materials at the little tinyurl.com/ch370at. Do note that's a lowercase o, not a zero. And the QR code will also take you there. But this is going to take you to a Dropbox folder I have shared with the world, and I only put things up there if I'm okay with other people having it. The only thing I ask is that you don't try to profit from the stuff I make available for free up there. But beyond that, feel free to go on in. Now, let's start talking about the 14 absolute truths of security. So first off, it's a list of things that are always true about security, fairly obvious from the name, but it's regardless of organizational type, operating system, cloud, or other type of technology. I don't care. Throw any variable you'd like to throw at this. These 14 things always remain true about security. Now, I've had some people challenge me on this. Well, you know, there's no such thing as an absolute in security. Yeah, but there's this thing out there that says in order for something to be a rule, it's got to have an exception. I'm about to tell you about the 14 exceptions that make it true that there are truths, absolute truths in security. Now, note this is an evolving list. Okay, it very first came into being, I thought it up clear back around 1996, and it started out as 5 truths, and eventually it grew up to 8 and then 10, and it was at 13 for about 7 years, and I added a 14th back in 2016. I'll point that one out to you when we get to it. But as I gain more insight and I learn more in this industry, where I hope if you're going to work in cybersecurity, you're ready to be a lifetime learner, because that really is what we have to be. So I'm learning all the time, just like you are. Okay. And as I learn more and gain greater insight, I occasionally add something to this list. But having said that, I've never added an item to this list without thinking about it for at least a year, and some were more than that. If I'm going to stand up here and tell you I have a list of absolute truths, then they better be absolute truths and not maybe, kind of, sort of, once in a while, whenever you feel like it, truths. Okay, they've truly got to be absolutes. Okay, so a lot of thought really does go into this. It's not just something I slap together. And you should note that these truths do not stand alone. I'm going to go through them with you one at a time, but the full picture really comes together when you look at the list as a whole, which we are going to do at the end. But several of them, for lack of a better way of saying it, feed off of each other, so to speak. Okay, exactly as the slide says. But you know, you can take each one of them on its own merit, but the real power of this list, I think, really comes when it's taken as indeed a list. Okay, and last but by no means least, not all of you will agree with everything that I have to say tonight. That's okay. There's over 70 people listening to my voice right now, and more of you may listen in recordings later on and so forth. And many of you have a lot of years of experience, and that's all great. And some of the things I say tonight, you may say, oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And that's okay. As long as I make you think. As long as I, in some cases, perhaps make you think about things you have never thought about before, or in many cases, perhaps make you think about things you have thought about before, but think about them in new and different ways. Either one, there's value there. Okay, there's some merit there. So if we walk away from this talk tonight, whether we, in the final analysis, whether we agree to disagree or agree to agree, if I made you think, then your hour hasn't been wasted. Okay, so let's get into our first absolute truth of security. The first absolute truth of security says there is no such thing as security. There are only varying degrees of insecurity. And this is absolutely true. Too many cybersecurity practitioners, they think they go in and it's their job to secure the network. It isn't, because that is an impossible task. The actual job of a cybersecurity practitioner is to determine the correct level of insecurity, attempt to obtain that level of insecurity, and then attempt to maintain that level of insecurity. Now, could I make all that statement by replacing the word insecurity with the word security? Yes. Yeah, sure I could. But we're dealing with a perception management problem here. When we sit down and we talk to our senior management and we tell them we are going to find the correct level of security, what they hear us say is that we're going to secure the network. Okay. By contrast, if we sit down with our senior management and we say we are going to find the correct level of insecurity, they kind of sit up and they go, wait a minute, what'd you say? And you wind up having an extremely different conversation with your senior management. You wind up setting an extremely different set of goals and objectives. They come away from that meeting knowing that you're not going to go out there and make the network secure. You're going to go out there and make the network more secure, hopefully. Okay. Now, some people have a problem with this. No such thing as security, only varying degrees of insecurity. Actually, this isn't a problem at all, because if you look at the second absolute truth of security, the network does not exist to be secured, and it doesn't. No organization in history has ever spent, whatever the magic number is, of, $10 million, $100 million, $1 billion, I don't know. No organization ever spent their budget to build a network so that they could secure it. No, you build a network so that you can pass data. Now, granted, we'd like that data to pass in a fast, efficient, reliable, and nowadays very secure manner. Well, I'm not saying any of those are untrue or incorrect, but at the most fundamental level, a network exists to pass data. We did not build that network so we could secure it. Even a classified network such as SIPRNet in the government. If you're not familiar, I'm going to simplify this a great deal, but in the United States Department of Defense, there's two networks, NIPRNet and SIPRNet. NIPRNet passes unclassified data, SIPRNet passes classified data. And even a network like SIPRNet passing, highly sensitive national secrets type information, even that network was not built and created so that we could secure it. We created SIPRNet so that we could pass classified data. But again, fundamentally, so we could pass data, okay? And I do have some idea what I'm talking about here. When I was at AT&T, I was on the initial working group that spawned the whole SIPRNet idea and where that all came from. I was there for its inception. I know why we created it. We created it so we could pass some data. It just so happens, given the nature of that data, we needed to supersize the security, and I hope we did, but it was to pass data. So no network exists to be secured. The network exists to pass data. Therefore, the fact that there is no such thing as security on a network, only varying degrees of insecurity, is a lesser problem than what you might think otherwise. Now, the third absolute truth is perhaps the single most common place that I see security practitioners make a big mistake, okay? It says when security gets in the way of the mission, security is wrong, not the mission. When too many cybersecurity practitioners, they have this misunderstanding that it's their job to go in and say no to everything. No, we can't do this. It's not secure. No, we can't do that. It's not secure. Now let me tell you what the real job says. Here's the real job description. It's our job to say no to everything until a valid business need is defined. And once the valid business need is defined, then it's our job to step up and say, okay, let's do this. Now, let's make it as secure as we can make it, but let's get the job done. Okay, what do you suppose would happen? Think about a company such as SANS. One of the things that we would be very concerned about as a company is for our competitors to go into our website and see, you know, what we teach, where we teach, when we teach, what we charge, and start trying to build out a curriculum to match us. There should be competitive intelligence analysis, obviously. Clearly, somebody like the current head of SANS is oh boy, oh yeah, Eric Bassel. Sorry, Eric. Eric Bassel. And this is the kind of thing that would keep Eric Bassel awake at night, is worrying about that sort of thing. So what do you suppose would happen if I went to Eric and I said, now, Eric, you no longer have to worry about that, because you see, we have removed all of that information from our website, and our competitors no longer know what we teach, where we teach, what we charge, etc. They cannot do competitive intelligence analysis. Oh, by the way, our students also have no idea what we teach, where we teach, what we charge, etc. So we're never going to generate another penny of revenue. But by golly, we are secure. What do you suppose Eric's going to have to say? Before you answer, you ought to know that Eric is an old military guy. And so he is, in a really colorful fashion, going to inform me of exactly how wrong I am and exactly how little time I have to fix that. And if I do it repeatedly, that's going to become a career limiting move. I will have an opportunity to update that resume. Okay, because security just got in the way of the mission. A more realistic example, and this is one I have seen a few dozen times throughout my career. You go into your network, you start implementing all these great security features, you introduce a bunch of latency on the network, you are going to be told to remove the security feature. A friend of mine once implemented a security feature, stopped his CEO from getting to the website superbowlxxxvi.com. He removed the security feature. You get my point, okay? Latency on a network, a lot of security features, they're really amazing. You start implementing them, you also start introducing latency, and you will be told to fix that issue, okay? So now some of you are sitting there going, well, yeah, but you know, I work in the government and it's a classified environment maybe, and oh, this doesn't apply. Yes, it does. Where I learned this truth is while I was in the military. And there was a handful there of, I was stationed and I had a hardship tour while I was in the service. I had to spend 4 years at Hickam Air Force Base, Hawaii, and somebody had to go there. But there was a handful of never enjoyable, but always memorable occasions when we had to go explain issues to the four-star general that we were having surrounding the crypto. And in one of those cases, the bombers, they could load the bombs on the aircraft and it could take off about 20 minutes, but it was taking over an hour to load our crypto. And the four-star general invited us to his office to explain what was going on, and we did. And we got done with our explanation. He said, "Okay, I understand. Now let me explain something to you. My bombers do not exist to carry your crypto. My bombers exist to carry those bombs. Therefore, if it takes 1 second longer for you to load your crypto than it does to load my bombs, get your crypto off my aircraft." He kind of had a point there. Now, of course, we did have, this also explains another point about security really well. We had to have a little more discussion with the good general, because you see, the crypto I'm talking about is referred to as friend or foe. If it's not properly loaded on the aircraft, when the aircraft takes off, it shows up as an enemy aircraft on radar and we shoot it down. Which, if you follow that through to the final conclusion, is also kind of anti-mission. But you do see the point. At a fundamental level, he did kind of have a point there. That's just one of several times that I learned that, even in classified environments. I once passed classified data across an unencrypted network because a regulation told me to do it because of this absolute truth. Okay, yeah, there's a long war story there. But so this does apply regardless of civilian sector, government sector. It truly doesn't matter. When security gets in the way of the mission, security is always wrong, not the mission. Some of you, if you've taken certain SANS courses, 401, for example, 301, for example, then you've seen this. Prevention is ideal. Detection is a must, but detection without response is useless. Prevention is absolutely ideal. We want all the preventative technologies in place we can possibly get our hands on. Good, strong authentication procedures, preferably two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. Good, strong firewall rules, et cetera. All the preventative technologies you can put in place, get those put in place. Absolutely, you betcha. Okay. But any security technology that can be implemented by a human being can be defeated by a human being. If they want to badly enough, if they have the motivation, the time, the skills, they can defeat any security that you put in place. And when that failure occurs, it is absolutely vital that you detect that problem. And then, of course, you kind of need to do something about it. And I see it all the time. Companies go in, they spend, $1 billion on all this intrusion detection stuff. And I mean, it's beautiful. They've got color-coded cables running around, and the intrusion detection system is detecting all this stuff. And you say, wow, this is amazing. Now, what do you do when I see something? And they say, well, every time I see something, we print out this report and we put it in this file cabinet. And you're like, yeah, but what do you do? And they're like, well, we also polish the file cabinet once a month. And oh, by the way, that thing spits out a lot of reports. So, we empty the file cabinet out once a month, but it's okay. We shred all those documents. And that's their entire response program. You're scratching your head going, seriously? Why did you spend all that money on detection if that's going to be your response? It just doesn't make any sense. It's a complete and total waste of resources. But where we are failing right now as an industry, to be honest, is the middle one. Detection is a must. It is actually pretty rare for an organization today to self-detect a breach. More often, they're getting a knock on the door from the FBI or someone of this nature, letting them know, hey, look, we just found all your data somewhere else. You have clearly had a breach. Brian Krebs has broken several breaches this way, several others too. There's dwell time, the time from breach to discovery. We're getting better. A few years ago, it was like 200 to 300 days for dwell time. Last estimate I saw was about 89 days. So, we're making some improvement. And the whole threat hunting initiative that's going on in cybersecurity now, one of its primary goals is to lower dwell time, which is a really great goal to have. But still, it is pretty rare. Take a look at Marriott and some others. It is pretty rare for organizations today to self-discover their own breaches. So the detection is a must area. That's one place where we're really not getting the job done very well at all. Okay. Truth number 5, security must always be driven by business need. You could actually say this one in a slightly different way. A solution without a problem is not a solution. It is a waste of resources. And as some of our truths coming up are going to explain, we never have the resources we need. And one of the problems, and I have to struggle with this one myself, cybersecurity people, almost without exception, started out as IT people. And IT people love shiny toys. I'm sitting here, I'm just as proud and happy as I can possibly be. Within easy range of my eyeballs, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 computers here in my office. Wow, I've got shiny toys more than I know what to do with. And that just makes me so happy. But did I really need them all? Yes, okay, I did. Now, let's please understand, every company has a CFO. It's usually the chief financial officer. In my company, the CFO is the chief frustration officer. She's better known as my wife. So I had to submit, requisitions for all of these computers and resubmit in 90 days for further disapproval and so forth. But I needed these things, right? But when we're implementing our security, do we really need that latest whiz-bang product that came out? Is that how you solve security? Is by implementing every shiny toy that comes on the market? If it is, your security program is probably struggling, okay? If you can't map every security measure you have, technical or otherwise, if that cannot be mapped back to a specific business need, then you do not need the security measure. It is that simple. Okay. If you can't sit down and read your company's financial statements, you need to go to a class to learn how to do it. Because guess how you map this all back to a business need? You have to be able to read the financial statements. You got to understand the business needs, in other words. Okay. You've got to have that little bit of manager in you to be really good at cybersecurity. So a solution without a problem is not a solution. It just wastes our resources. Don't just throw shiny toys at the security problem. It's not the way it works. This is very, very closely associated. Security is a cost center. It is not a profit center. Remember, these truths don't stand alone. Number 5 and 6 go pretty much hand in hand. So the security program does not generate revenue for the company. Now, it is a true statement, a completely true statement. We help to guard the revenue generation. We help to protect it. We help to make it happen, and we help to protect it once it happens. That's all true. But how we do that is not readily apparent. And so consequently, we are seen as a cost center. We cost the company money. And that means that we must forever justify our existence, our staffing, our budgets to management. Because when it comes time to dole out the people and the budget, who gets the people and the budget first? The profit centers do. The cost centers are left scrabbling for whatever is left over. And this is simply the way it works. And now this one, I do realize these words don't translate well to the government sector, but the concept does, because government sector, you do still have budgets and staffing and so forth. So yeah, the concept, even though the terminology would change in a government sector, the principle, the truth still does apply there. Security is always a cost center. Deal with that. Okay, we're coming back to it. And security is a process, not a product. Number 5, 6, and 7 are all very closely associated. Don't get me wrong. Without security products, our security program would be in a lot of trouble. We need good antivirus products. We need good firewall products, intrusion detection, intrusion prevention, and all the other security tools that we do use. Uh, Shiny toys may not be the whole answer, but we do need some. Okay, but you have to get the process of security right first. The not very sexy and mundane stuff like policy, procedure, budgeting, manpower, and staffing, and the process that goes into making security a whole thing. When you get that firewall, that shiny toy, you go buy the best firewall on the market. How do you know what rules to put in there? The answer is you got to go read your policy. Go into most firewalls, look where at the screen where you build the rules, you know what it's called? A policy editor. I wonder why it gets that name. Because the firewall is the physical implementation of the security policy. If you don't have a security policy, then you have no idea what those firewall rules ought to say. And therefore, before you can implement your shiny toy, that new firewall, you have to get the process of security done right. Okay, and it's not exciting and it's not fun, and it's the kind of work I do a lot of is policy and procedure and things like this, and you have no idea how much of my consulting work I get from other consultants. They just won some big contract and they're going to go do a pen test or whatever, and they're just so happy and it's so exciting, but they've got this piece in the contract that's boring. They wanted a policy review, and so they'll toss it over the fence to me, and I do that boring policy review, and they go off and do the exciting stuff, and I get paid the exact same hourly rate and for doing that boring work, and I cry all the way to the bank. Thank you very much. Okay, but most consultants, they don't want to do that stuff. Okay, it's actually quite a niche in the security consulting world that isn't very well filled right now, because there's just not too many folks out there that like doing it. But you got to get the process of security correct, and then you can figure out what to do with the products and what products you need and so forth. Okay, remember, part of the process of security, it goes back to being able to justify your products with business need, and justifying with business need, that's part of that process too. Okay, absolute truth number 8. This, you may notice at the bottom, this is the one that I added in 2016. You cannot process encrypted data ever. Now, before I proceed, I am very aware that there is a form of encryption that is currently in development that would indeed, if they ever get it working, allow for you to edit encrypted data. But that is at best still in development stage, and I would put it in the early R&D stage, frankly. We're years away from seeing that. So with the current state of the art of cryptography as I stand here today, this does remain an absolute truth, and I think it will for a long time to come. You cannot process encrypted data ever. If you attend the Sec 301 class, I have a lab in there called Visual Crypto, and one of the things you do is edit ciphertext and try to decrypt it, and it comes up garbled. Okay, when you try to process encrypted data, it doesn't work. And the reason this wound up getting added is because I started, when I was teaching even like 500 level classes and things, I would get questions from students, like, for example, go back to the Target breach and so forth, and they'd say, well, Target and Home Depot and PF Chang, and unfortunately there's a long list, and they'd be saying, why didn't those companies have an encrypted database of all those credit card numbers? And I said, well, they did. Go check every one of them. They did. But that's not what the attackers went after. What the attackers went after, I'll just use Target. I know I'm going clear back to December of 14, but it's a good example for an explanation here, a well-known example for an explanation here. In the case of Target, the attackers broke in and accessed their payment processing systems. That's the system when you walk up to the checkout counter, you swipe your credit card, it reads your credit card into it, it encrypts it, and sends it off for processing. But between the time that you swipe your card and it gets encrypted, there is at least a split second when your credit card absolutely must be in a plain text form in RAM inside of that device. And that's when the attackers grabbed it. That is why, if you did not shop at Target during a very specific 4-day period back in 2013, then you are not part of the Target breach, because they didn't access the whole encrypted database containing the credit card numbers of everybody that's ever shopped at Target. They only accessed the credit card numbers of the people who shopped at Target during those 4 days. And the same thing, again, goes for Home Depot and, all the others, okay? But so the other one, so I kept having to explain that. And then again, even in 500 level classes, I'd be teaching a 501, for example, and someone come in and I'd say, connect to the SEC 501 access point. And they'd say, well, is it secure? And I'd say, well, no. And they'd say, why aren't you doing to use WPA2? And I'd say, well, we are. And they say, well, then it's secure. And I'd say, no, it's not. And I'd have to stop and draw them a diagram. When you're dealing with crypto, you always have to remember encryption and decryption can only occur on the device where the key resides. And if you're doing WPA2 encryption with your Wi-Fi, you're going out to, Amazon. Amazon doesn't have your WPA2 encryption key to decrypt your WPA2 traffic. If everybody had your WPA2 encryption key, then WPA2 wouldn't do you any good. The WPA2 encryption key resides on your laptop and on the wireless access point, and encryption and decryption can only occur on the device where the key resides. So when you look at, I don't care, WEP, WPA, WPA2, WPA3, pick your favorite, preferably now WPA3, then you're still only encrypting from the device, like a laptop, to the access point, because that's where the key resides. And that's why this one kind of has a, 8.5. If you don't know who has access to your encryption keys, you don't know who has access to your data. It's kind of a flip side of the same coin. And I'm going to give you a perfect real world example of what I'm talking about. Several of you may be very, very aware that OPM, the Office of Personnel Management, had a breach. And what was breached was a database of SF-86 forms. If you're not familiar with an let me try it again. If you're not familiar with an SF-86 form, if you ever go to get a security clearance to the United States government, that's the form you have to fill out. And on an SF-86, what you put down is your entire life. You put all of, obviously, your own contact information, but also the contact information for your family, your friends, your relatives, your co-workers, your bosses, in some cases going back 15 and in some cases even more years, but at least 15 years in most cases. And then all of those people are interviewed by interviewers, and then all of their comments are put together and attached. So by the way, your fingerprints are on the form as well. That's what was compromised, that database. Now OPM, well, they were doing some good security. They had that database in an AES, Advanced Encryption Standard, 256-bit encrypted database. Now, that's about as good of encryption as you can get your hands on today. The problem is, here set the database AES 256-bit encrypted, and in the exact same folder set the key to decrypt the database. So when the attacker broke into the OPM server, they were able to download the database, then download the key to decrypt it, decrypt the database, boom, they got something like 250 million people's SF-86 data, my own included. If you can't tell me who has access to your encryption key, you can't tell me who has access to your data. And so when you bring these two together and kind of tie it in, here's what I've just told you. If you ever go to design a system, whether it's a network, a standalone system, whatever the case may be, I want you to do some whiteboard diagramming where you just got this box talking to this box and so forth. And I want you to figure out where is it that you have to decrypt the data to process it, because that is the point where crypto can't help you, because the data has got to be plain text. Think about a whole disk encrypted hard drive. Several of you have used them. I'm working on one right now. And when I load this slide up on the hard drive, this slide is encrypted because I'm using whole disk encryption. But when it loads up onto my screen, it's decrypted and in RAM in an encrypted form. I wonder why a common form of malware is called a RAM scraper. Why would an attacker beat their head against my whole disk encrypted hard drive when they can just wait for me to open the document and swipe it out of RAM? Okay, in a plain text form. Okay, so go through your system, find the place where the data cannot be in an encrypted form, and wherever that is, you have to put extra protections around it, and because the crypto cannot help you there. And then you have to figure out a way to keep that key stored off in a separate location. There is software out there you can buy that'll help you do this, but you got to make sure that key stays off in a separate repository that's highly secured. Okay. Now, I see that I've got a couple questions popping in. I'm going to take all the questions right at the end, okay? But again, these are the two I've added in 2016. I know I spent some time on them, but I figured out a lot of people just weren't giving this any thought. There is this misconception out there that if at any point in its life a piece of data was once encrypted, then it's forever protected. And that just simply is nowhere close to true, okay? So number 9, all good security is custom fit. Compliance does not equal security. And by the way, that also includes a GDPR. But please do understand, I am not bashing on compliance, okay? You should have seen some of the nightmares I saw in hospitals prior to HIPAA and some of the problems prior to Gramm-Leach-Bliley and Sarbanes-Oxley and et cetera. Compliance as a general thing is a good thing, okay? But there's a misconception out there that if I am compliant with PCI or whatever it is, then I am magically secure, and that simply isn't the case. And in fact, it can be a bad thing. If you ever study ethical hacking or regular hacking for that matter, you're going to find that the first step is information gathering. The more I learn about you, your network, your people, your configuration, et cetera, the more likely I am to find something I can take advantage of. Well, so let's see what that looks like in the year 2020. Company A just very proudly announced that they have passed their PCI compliance audit. Congratulations, good deal. Now, in that press release, they mentioned the company B, consulting company B, helped them to pass their PCI compliance audit. Now, they have to put this in their press release. Company B requires it in the contract because, see, the more press releases Company B gets mentioned in, the more marketing fodder they have. And so they will, give Company A a discount if they mention them in their press releases and so forth. It's a very common business practice in consulting. I used to run one of the largest consulting practices in the world at the time. Trust me, I know the tricks. So they had to put that in there. Now, what the attacker does is they come in and they see this press release, Company A passed a PCI compliance with help of Company B. They go to Company B's website and they see that Company B really likes product C. They just love product C, and they've got a partnership with them, et cetera. Okay, now what kind of a leap is it to say if Company B helped Company A get compliant and Company B likes product C, then they probably implemented product C at Company A. And then I go into to product C's online documentation, see what its capabilities are, how it can be configured, et cetera, and then look at the PCI compliance guidance and figure out, okay, if it's most likely that Company A has product C in place and they have used it to pass PCI compliance, then they almost certainly configured it this way. And once I know what products you have and how they're probably configured, how much of a leap is it for me to figure out how to get around those products and attack you? Companies pass their PCI compliance audit, get broken into within 30 days. How do you think it happens? Okay, and it happens more than you might realize. So you've got to, please understand me, I understand, you got to pass a PCI compliance, and I'm picking on PCI here. Pick your favorite form of compliance, okay, it all applies. But if you got to pass PCI, you got to pass PCI. It is a business requirement. Remember what I said, security can't get in the way of the mission, and it can't get in the way of the business requirements. And so I get it. You have to pass the audit, but do you really have to go just far enough to pass the audit and quit? What if you went just an extra step here and there? and made your security a little more unpredictable. You hear all the time, never do security through obscurity. Of course we do. If now, don't get me wrong, if you base your entire security program on obscurity, it's going to fail quickly, it's going to fail miserably. But a little bit of obscurity can help your program be much better. Because another way of saying obscurity would be unpredictability. If you're too predictable, then people are going to predict what you're doing and they're going to figure out how to defeat you. Okay. Whereas if you're at just that little bit of unpredictability in there, then pretty quick you're going to make it a lot harder for the attacker to come after you because they're not quite as sure about what you're doing anymore. Okay. Number 10, in security, the most dangerous thing in the world is what you think you know. And I'll give you a perfect example. If you were to go to that YouTube link that you see at the bottom of the slide, you would see a video on an attack called the cold boot attack. What happens to RAM when you turn a computer off? Well, it just goes away, right? Actually, no, it doesn't. It lingers for seconds, in some cases, depending on the RAM chips, up to minutes. And the video shows a way that you can actually freeze the chips and make it last minutes or even hours without losing the contents of RAM. Okay, the content of the video isn't the point here. Here is the point. For years, if you'd have asked me what happens to RAM when you turn a computer off, I'd have said, well, it just goes away. The contents just go away. As soon as they lose power, it's gone. And I was wrong. And I never questioned my knowledge because I didn't think I knew the answer to that question. I knew the answer to that question. And therefore, I didn't question myself. And this is a mistake we can't let ourselves fall into. I think I mentioned something a little bit ago. I hope you're ready to be a lifetime learner if you're going to work in cybersecurity, because our career field is changing at such an amazing speed that it's almost impossible to keep up. And you have to forever question what you know, because what I know today may not be true tomorrow. Okay, I'm pretty sure all the things on this list are going to be true tomorrow. Otherwise, they wouldn't be on here. But you see my point, especially when it gets to technology. New technologies, new techniques, etc. They're invented all the time. And we have to be ready for that. We have to learn about them and understand them. And we can't let ourselves fall in the trap that I let myself fall into with the cold boot attack, thinking that something like that could not be done. By the way, the attack defeats whole disk encryption when it works. And I will also tell you that video is going to make that attack look trivial. It's not, but it is a viable attack. And it is possible. And I didn't think it was because I had a fundamental misunderstanding about how something worked and I didn't question myself. Don't let it happen to you. Learn from my mistakes. Okay. I'll be honest, when I first saw that video, I was like, no way. I did the research and found out, it actually would work. Okay. Number 11, you cannot secure what you do not control. 9/10 of being a security person is being a control freak, and we want to control everything, and we can't, because if nothing else, nobody controls the internet, and we don't control our partner companies' networks. Did you see the report that came out, I believe it was early last year, that island hopping is about half of all attacks? That's where someone breaks into a company you partnered up with and comes in through their VPN connection right into your network. You don't have control over their network. You don't have control over their security or lack thereof. You don't control the internet for darn sure. So you cannot secure what you do not control. And you always have to be cognizant of this. You have to look at your network. You have to understand what you control, what you do not control. As far as the stuff that you do control, to what level do you control it? The DMZ, the public access area of your network, the place that people you don't know get to connect to devices and so forth, that's that you don't have a lot of control. You have some. Okay, you can monitor, etc., but people you don't know are allowed in that area, and therefore it's a lesser degree of control. Your internal network, where only your users are allowed, and you can authenticate them with multi-factor authentication. communication and train them and awareness training, et cetera. That's a much higher degree of control. And of course, so you may have one or more enclaves on your network with critical servers locked away in their own little subnet behind a firewall. Those would be an enclave. That's a pretty high degree of control. So I'm gonna simplify this a little bit, but for almost all networks, if you want to figure out what you control, what you don't control, and to what level you control, et cetera, point at the firewall. Okay. Now, that is a little bit of an oversimplification in some networks, because some networks do have, multiple layers and so on, and determining level of control is a more difficult challenge there. But a lot of companies, and I'm going to go so far as say a really significant majority of companies, you point at the firewall and you look at how it's configured. And outside the firewall is the internet. There's no control. And then there's an interface heading off to the DMZ, and that's a degree of control, but not a great degree of control. And there's another interface facing the internal network, and that's a greater degree of control, and et cetera. You point at the firewall, you find the control point, you find where you do and do not control. Okay. Again, there are exceptions. And quite frankly, if you're working in a network that is one of the exceptions, good job, because it's more difficult to determine your level of control. That also means it's more difficult for the attacker to figure out what you're doing too. There's a little unpredictability there. Okay. Number 12, you cannot prevent what you allow. And I am very aware that this sounds simplistic, but people forget it all the time. I'll go into a client and I'll say, well, nobody can attack my web server. It's behind a firewall. And they're like, yeah, but by definition, a web server has got to be reachable by everybody in the world on TCP port 80 and perhaps port 443. And therefore, if the attack comes in over those ports, guess what? It's going to go through your firewall without ever slowing down. And why this became such an important truth for me to add is attacks like the drive-by download. If you really look at where the drive-by download attacker came from, one of the most common attacks yet today, and it's been around for a long time, firewalls got pretty good. If you have a modern, well-configured firewall in place, it's pretty hard to break through it. It's not trivial at all. I didn't say impossible, of course, but it's not simple. Okay. So the attackers looked at that and went, well, getting through the firewall is getting really hard. Let's come up with a different idea. And they said, okay, what is this firewall going to have to allow? They applied this truth. And they said, okay, here's how it has to work. If someone behind the firewall is going to surf the internet, then the following must be true. The firewall must allow the initial request out to the web server and must allow the web server to respond back with a web page. That has got to be true, or you cannot surf the web. And so they said, how do we put our maliciousness into the web page? And so they went out and it used to be if someone defaced a web page, they'd change the words and the pictures and try to do it to embarrass you. And that still does happen. But most of the time today, when someone defaces a web page, they're careful to make sure they don't change what it looks like. And instead, they are putting code in there, JavaScript, other things, that when it downloads to your browser, it causes your browser, if you weren't aware of this, when you load a typical internet web page today, your computer actually connects anywhere from 5 to, in some cases, over 100 different locations on the internet to download various banner ads and other elements of the page. Well, now when you hit that web page, there's another element of the page, and it causes your computer to connect to the hacker's website and download the malware and infect you. And congratulations, you just became a member of a botnet. Or today you may have just started doing crypto mining, or whatever the case may be. Any number of things, ransomware, you name it. Okay, but when you really boil that down, what the attackers did was said, okay, attacking firewalls has gotten too hard, so we're going to go for a simpler route, and we're going to figure out what the firewall must allow. And we're going to figure out how to craft our attack to work within those bounds. And they did, and it became known as a drive-by download. And that is one example of several I could use here, by the way. Okay, it's a really good example though. And then there's this. Security is first and foremost a people issue. Once again, it's not about our shiny toys, and it's not just about our products. We need them, but they're not the whole story. Security is about people, because who actually implements what in total becomes the most significant portion of your overall security posture? Your users do. Every time your users change their password, choose a good password over a bad password, lock their PC before they go to lunch, unlock it correctly when they come back from lunch, and the list just goes on and on. Every time they're doing all of these things that we want them to do, they are implementing the things that in total become the most significant part of the overall security posture of an organization. If we want them to do that well, we better train them on what it is we want them to do and any skills necessary. How do you lock your PC to go to lunch? We have to train them the skills. We have to make sure they know what that list is. And this is why I am a very, very firm believer that two of the most important skills that you can have as a cybersecurity practitioner is amazing communication skills and a very, very deep understanding of human nature. Okay? You need a deep understanding of human nature for a couple of reasons. First, I don't know if you knew this or not, but your users do not like you. If you got into cybersecurity to win a popularity contest, you are in the wrong job. Okay, your users do not like you, and they are going to argue and be upset by the security measures you put in place. Think about it. Almost all security makes a computer harder to use rather than easier to use. It makes their job harder. Is it easier to come into work in the morning and just turn your computer on and go to work, or have to enter a username and password first? We implement things that make their job harder. They don't like us. But it's also a fact that, in my experience now, with obvious exceptions from time to time, but for the vast majority of people, if you can get them to understand why this stuff matters so much, they step up and say, oh, well, how do I help? Okay, they're happy to help once you get across to them why it is so vitally important. And that means you've got to have amazing communication skills, both written and oral. And when I talk about oral communication, I'm talking one-on-one communication and communication to a group. And I'm very aware that the number one phobia in the world is a fear of public speaking. Give you a hint. If you have that particular fear, check out Toastmasters. It's an amazing organization. They helped me a lot. They'll help you too. There's some good Toastmasters chapters all over the world. Okay, check them out. But you've got to be able to explain why this stuff matters. And part of explaining why this stuff matters, that takes us right back to the deep understanding of human nature. If you don't understand why they're upset, you're not going to explain things well. Okay, and it always amazes me when a technical person explains a highly technical concept to a non-technical person, and when the non-technical person doesn't understand it, the technical person just says it louder, like that's really going to help. It doesn't. Okay, but so security is a people issue. You've got to address the people side of security. That leads you to the process of security, and that leads you to figuring out what kind of shiny toys and products and so forth you need and how they need to be configured. But you've got to get the people right first. Okay. Number 14, a problem without a solution is not a problem at all. It is simply a reality to be dealt with. Anwar Sadat said that. And it really summarizes this list better than I possibly could have on my own. It also summarizes a whole lot of things in life too. If you adopt that as your personal mantra, your personal stress level will drop. I know from personal experience. This has become one of my mantras I try to live by. A problem without a solution is not a problem at all. It is reality to be dealt with. So when we look at the total list, the fact that there's no such thing as security, there's always only varying degrees of insecurity, that's not a problem. That is a reality that you have to deal with. Okay, and it's okay to deal with it because the network does not exist to be secured anyway. And you can't let your security get in the way of the mission. If you do, you're going to be wrong every single time. And security does have to be driven by business need because we are a cost center, and therefore security cannot be a product, it must be a process. And and all good security has got to be custom fit. We have to keep learning in this industry. We can't control we can't secure what we don't control, and we can't prevent what we have to allow. And we have to get the people side of security right because it's a problem without a solution. Therefore, it's a reality to be dealt with. This whole list is a reality to be dealt with. Okay, and I'll leave this. That's our final slide. I'm going to leave this, the list of 14 up here for you to look at. I do notice I have a couple of questions over here. Give me just a moment here to read the questions, if you would. Sorry, I'm having trouble seeing all of one of them.
Hey, Keith, I see two in there. If you unlock it from the control panel, you might see it easier. But the first one says, can you...
Yeah, I see them now.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah, there. I had to scroll the. Can I speak to SSL keys on a wireless access? Okay, I think this goes back to the deal about you cannot encrypt. You cannot process encrypted data. I believe that's what this question is referring back to. If I'm wrong, you can email me afterwards and we'll talk it over. But it still remains true. I think what you're talking about here is putting your SSL keys on your wireless, or excuse me, on the web application firewall and decrypting SSL data at that point for analysis. But this is why you do it, because you can't analyze encrypted data. It's hidden from you, so you have to decrypt it first. Okay, and can I speak to zero knowledge proofs? Okay, first off, that's going to be a tough one because I know of at least 3 different definitions of that term. But zero knowledge, as I typically apply it, is when data is encrypted on my own computer and then perhaps uploaded to a backup provider. They do not have access to the encryption key, and therefore they have zero knowledge of my data. If that's not the type of zero knowledge you're referring to, let me know and we'll take another stab at that. But that's the form of the way that I use zero knowledge the most, is when I'm referring to that particular type. And we have not really a question, but a comment. No friends in cybersecurity. Looks like I chose the perfect field. Yeah, probably me too. You do know the difference between an introverted cybersecurity person and an extroverted cybersecurity person. The extroverted cybersecurity person looks at your shoes while they're talking to you. And at that, Patrick, if I didn't answer your questions well, my email, Keith, well, come back over here. Keith@netip.com. Shoot me an email. We can have a discussion. I'll make sure you get some better answers there. But with that, I'm coming right up on my hour. If there's no other questions, I'm going to thank you very much for your time. This has been the 14 Absolute Truths of Security. My name is Keith Palmgren. I hope you've enjoyed it, and stay safe out there.